on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel once again, and today I have a very special project for you. We have a completely custom from the ground up PC. I'm talking zip ties, I'm talking AliExpress, I'm talking used. You're not going to want to miss this because it's going to be very important to the future of the channel and the future of probably my life as well. So let's get into it. So for starters, the name of this PC, because every PC needs to have a custom name. The name of this PC is going to be called Project Nyakoj. That's going to be N-Y-A-C-O-J. Why Nyakoj? Makes no sense. Well, let me explain to you why it makes sense to me. So first off, what does that mean? It means not your average cup of Joe. Why is it called not your average cup of Joe? Well, let me explain to you. So for starters, if I wanted to put not your average cup of Joe into a title, the title would be this long. And let's be fair, the title of a video really shouldn't be this long. It should be like this long. So it gives us a good YouTube title, a good YouTube header, but it also gives credit to one of the most important people that have put me on the tech radar. And that would be a man named Joe. So who exactly is Joe? Joe is the reason why you guys got every single one of those YouTube videos back in the day on GPUs, on used PCs. Almost every single part that I ever had on my channel was because of Joe. Joe is a retired senior veteran that works at a recycling center. And I stumbled into contact with him out of chance almost 7 years ago now. And at the time, I was just coming out of high school and experimenting with all these PC parts. At the time, I had like a Core 2 Duo PC, and he helped me get on the radar with better specs. And through that, I started making videos, as you guys know. So in this PC, we're going to be using brand new parts. We're going to be using parts from AliExpress. We're going to be using used parts from a different seller, a different marketplace, and parts from Joe. So this is every single one of the places you can get parts from, and we're making it a completely custom, unique travel PC. And that's very important because not your average cup of Joe is being built because it's going to be the last computer I ever build in California. Now, I don't have to go into economics to explain to you why I'm leaving California. What? As you can see right here, I'm actually painting my entire house. So the PC is going to be great because it'll allow me to not only make better videos for you guys so I can throw GPUs in and do some cool benchmarks and have a more newer, more up-to-date system to benchmark stuff with, but also I'll be able to take it with me on the plane easily as a carry-on item and not have to put it in a box. Very important when I'm going back and forth looking for a house. So with that said, let's get into the specs of this thing because let me tell you, the specs of this thing, extremely unique, and let's get into it. So every custom PC needs to have a core, it needs to have a motherboard, it needs to have a CPU. So what did I go with? You may have seen some videos from people recently on motherboards called R-Ying. It's not Air-Ying, it's R-Ying. These motherboards are BGA laptop CPUs directly soldered onto a motherboard, and you cannot remove the CPU. It's directly soldered. So it's a all-in-one solution with a copper slug then put on top of that. Essentially what this is it's a cheap way to get a modern-day Tiger Lake CPU. And for me, performance-wise, at the time when I bought this, because at the time of this video coming out, tons of YouTubers have made videos on this already. I had this a bunch of months ago. I just haven't been able to make the video yet. So what is the model that I bought? The model that I bought was the R-Ying 11900H engineering sample. The engineering sample, it runs at a base of 2.6 gigahertz. It's a 8-core, 16-thread Tiger Lake laptop CPU. We'll get into the more complex boost frequencies later in the video, probably during the benchmark section of this. But all core turbo, I was seeing about 4.1 gigahertz to 4.2 gigahertz on a full 8-core workload. So that would be like Fortnite, for example. As I said, I actually bought this entire combo months before people were talking about it. So months before people were talking about it, it was a lot cheaper. So when I bought it brand new from AliExpress, I paid a total of $171.98 for this combo. And that's a lot cheaper than it is now. So keep that in mind going forward on this build. Going forward with my love for AliExpress, I got a brand new CPU cooler. I got a Snowman all blacked out. It was a couple more dollars for that. 6 heat pipe CPU cooler, and it was $27.86 shipped to the house. So a lot of people in the used price performance scene know about Snowman. Snowman coolers are great value for money, so I just figured let's get a brand new one with brand new mounting hardware so it looks great in the case. Since this PC has NVMe slots, I wanted to get a brand new NVMe SSD so I could put the OS on that. I really prefer that now to having a regular SSD. I'd rather just get a 512 gigabyte and just throw that on the motherboard itself. So with that said, I did go ahead and get a 512 gigabyte Kingston PCIe 4.0 SSD. And that's very important because PCIe 4.0 is supported on this motherboard. So I actually picked up a 512 gig for $27.89 shipped from Walmart.com. Now that is with an associate discount, and I also use my Walmart credit card, which is 5% cash back on any Walmart.com purchase. So the 5% cash back comes in on that $27.89, so that would make it $25-ish, $24-ish dollars. Without my associate discount, it would have been $30.99. So still a great deal for a brand new 4.0 SSD from Walmart.com. So every computer needs RAM. I went on Newegg and was checking around the market for DDR4 around this time. It was early February when I built this PC. So RAM is still cheap as it was then. I actually picked up a brand called Mushkin. It's an American brand. They use obviously Samsung and Kingston dies and chips, but they are an American brand and they were very cheap. So I actually picked up a Redline Stiletto 32 gigabyte kit. That would be two 16 gigabyte sticks of DDR4. It's running at 3600 megahertz, excuse me. And that's actually running at CL18. So this is not CL16 RAM. What's important about this RAM though is that it's fast enough for our Tiger Lake laptop CPU, which only supports up to 3200 megahertz officially. So I doubt that we would get 3600 CL16 running on this motherboard because of the memory controller on the CPU. I believe the memory controller on the CPU is just very weak and wouldn't actually be able to handle the very fast RAM that we bought. So even this RAM as it sits now is very quick for this laptop CPU, so that's why I went with this kit. And it was a total of $76.81 shipped to the house. Pretty good deal. So since we're making this custom handle, I had to pick up a handle off eBay. For $7.29, I found this barn door handle. It's 1 inch in diameter side to side, so that will fit on the spare piece of metal I had found outside in my yard. So we're gonna sit that right on top of there with some bolts through it. That was picked up on eBay for $7.29, and we'll get more into the specs of that and how that's going to fit later in the video. I really wanted to pick the smallest case I could find. There were a few different options I had found. Some were expensive, some were a little cheaper. I ended up settling on a NR200P. I found an incredible deal on Mercari.com, a site I've never used before. It's the first time I ever used it. I found a different PC case I was going to go for called the Sama IMO2. It's very similar to the NR200. They both have unofficial support for micro ATX, which our motherboard is. However, on the NR200P, it's actually slightly smaller than the Sama IMO2. So I found this incredible deal on Mercari, and it was, they wanted $95 for the case. The problems with the case, they said, were it had a black paint chip that was missing, and they had the side panel glass still in the sealant. It had never been opened. So I sent in an offer for $60 I thought was fair, and they came back with an offer for $65 shipped. So I snatched that right up. That was $65 shipped for a NR200P with both side panels and all the accessories and both fans. incredible deal, and it's a great foundation for our custom PC that we're going to be going through. So for the two other components I picked out at the recycling center, Joe gave us a EVGA 600 watt power supply. It has a few PCIe power connectors. It has like 400 watts or so on the 12 volt rail. And this is a great power supply because it's small enough to fit in the NR200P, because we're going to be doing a custom build. I'm actually going to be mounting it vertical. So this is a great power supply, a great power number for us to use for this PC. And that was $10 from Joe. And they also sold us a 2 terabyte Toshiba hard drive for $15. So that was $25 out the door. However, what's very different about the recycling center now is when you buy stuff from them, it's very legal. I actually had to fill out paperwork, and I had to basically be a business. So I need to open a bank loan or get a business.
Why are you there? Get a life, get a job, apply for a bank loan, open a business.
Apply for a bank loan, open a business.
This kid just... Because when I filled this out, I had to actually fill it out like I was reclaiming property from the state, which is odd, but it was all fine and legal, and all I had to do was pay sales tax. After my local sales tax, which is 9.25%, it was $27.31 out the door, so still a great deal for those two PC parts. For our graphics card, there were a few different ways I could go with this, and I really didn't decide until building the computer that I should just use my 3060 Ti. So what I'm going to do is I actually picked up a 1063 gigabyte that I was going to use for this PC, and I decided that I'm just going to use the 3060 Ti and base it off of eBay used pricing, which is right now.
When I was buying all the parts for this PC, I was buying them in February. When I was filming some of this video, I was recording it in early May. And now we're in the middle of June. It's currently June 14th, and you can find 3060 Ti's on sale on eBay for $250. That is insane. So I'm going to include the price of a 3060 Ti used on eBay right now at $250 in our overall price.
Now, with all that said, that's an awful lot of information. We got tons of specs, we got tons of different parts. We have so much to do still. What's really cool about today's PC build is this is going to be a very special PC build because, like I said, last one in California, I actually recorded a lot of the early moments of this PC build as it happened. So I got to record going into the recycling center. I got to record going out of the recycling center when I got the deal, so you see my reactions to that. And we're just going to go kind of in history here because this PC was built in February and now it's May. So we're just going to go back in time to the first moment when I decided that I was going to go to the recycling center. We're going to go back in time and I'll meet you guys there.
What's up, everybody? I just got out of work right now, and we're going to be heading to my old recycling center. This is a place that I haven't been to in almost 6 years. So this is where I got all my GPUs from. And I'm going to be heading there. I'm going to try to get some footage, but I want to be very, very careful because, like I said, I haven't met these people in almost 6 years, so I want to be very nice to them. But I will be trying to pick up a power supply and maybe some other parts that I find. If I see something interesting, I will let you guys know as soon as after. But I really need to head over there because they close at 2. It's currently 12:51, so it's time to roll. Let's go to score a massive deal. So I just got out of the recycling center and I just scored some massive deals. These guys are just like I remember it. They still have tons of GPUs, they still have tons of parts. But today we weren't looking for a GPU, we were looking for a power supply, and we scored it. We got an EVGA 600 watt power supply, bronze. We just scored this bad boy right here, the 600 watt monster for 10 bucks. For $15, this is a Toshiba drive. And we also got this fan thrown in for free. I have one of these Cougar fans, and these are the best fans I've ever owned in my life. So I was so ecstatic, and these guys were so happy to have me back. I set up a relationship, and I can come whenever I like, as long as Joe is at the building. So shout out to Joe for getting me fired up and getting me all these PC parts over the years. You make a difference. And I got teared up over it. This man comes in, volunteers for free, and tests all these parts of this recycle center, and he was just the best, one of the best people I've ever met. So shout out to Joe for these, and Joe, we love you. So if we see right here, I actually have my custom cut piece of welding steel. I just took an angle grinder and I just cut it down to the exact dimensions of the inside of the case. Right now, I'm just kind of sanding down the edges and the corners to make sure I don't have any sharp edges when I'm handling this. And then we're going to give it a quick coat of black paint. I'm sure you're probably wondering why we're going to paint this black with just some basic bare sample house paint. And the answer is because I can and because I have it. So basically, we just want to make this cosmetically look nice if we ever have to look inside or there's an angle where we're checking it out from. And we also just want to protect it from rust. So this will be also protective and visual inside the case. We're looking at a shell of the NR200P, and essentially part of the problem is we have to make so many modifications to this case just to make this work. For modification number one, if you look closely here, I've actually already removed the power AC cable because our Chinese motherboard, as seen here, will not fit in this case as is. So we have to make a bunch of modifications to the standoffs and then also to the back I/O just to make this fit. Essentially, this is just the skeleton of the NR200. We have no hard drive cage, we have no nothing at all. So we're going to have to be making probably some cuts and also as well some new standoffs up in here. And for the last part, I want to make a custom handle. So I made this custom piece of welding steel, and this is cut exactly to the dimension of the inside lip of the NR200, so it is the exact cut. So if you put this in under here, this is a perfect fit to the bottom lip. So essentially what we're going to be doing is taking this steel, putting in a hole here, securing these with nuts and bolts so it is absolutely removable. And we'll be using this this handle here that we got for about $5. This is 1 inch as well. This is just going to be mounting like this to this bar through the grill. As we go along, it'll make more sense as we go. But modification number one is definitely going to be doing the bar through the grill. So we'll get started on that. So I want to give you guys a great view of this handle modification I want to make. So if we take this cold rolled steel I cut, we put it in through the I/O shield area. This is basically going to sit on this lip. You see this lip right here. And from this lip, it's going to be sitting under here.
we should then take the top mount like this. That'll be under. So that should be invisible. I did paint it. And then we should put our 1-inch bar just like that. So if we come on to the side a bit, you can see how all we'll need to make is 2 small holes in this plastic mesh, and we should have a top mounted handle. Obviously it's going to be straight, but I think they should work. I did run out of battery, but I did finish this up last night. And we do have the thing completely mounted, but we do need some new bolts because these ones don't really fit properly. Just for now, for reference, I have these with twist nuts on, but it still leaves us with the issues of how's the motherboard going to fit? How's the power supply going to fit? We just have a lot of questions. So I'm just going to ponder on this and we'll try and mock up some ideas. So I sat our motherboard inside of the case and I marked a few places with a Sharpie. And right now we're just going to drill these out and throw some standoffs in here because our motherboard is micro ATX and the case is meant for a mini ITX. So we have to create our own mounting system because as it sits now, the motherboard will not have any access to rear IO and the GPU will not line up with the PCIe slots. So we have to create our own mounting system. It's a little bit late tonight and I really wanted to get some of the stuff done on this build. But I did get some standoffs installed. So we have this one. We got put in right here. And then we also got this one put in over here. Up top, let me just pan up so we can see. If we look up here, these aren't going to work. So I'm just going to zip tie probably up here and up here. There's this little clip up here that the motherboard does sit on. So I'm going to zip tie to that and then maybe get some sort of filament and fill right here and zip tie to. But it's looking like this build is going to be bolts and zip ties because this case is just not fitting for anything. I actually have this bottom bracket out right now. So there's a lot of stuff that's going around and I will keep you up. Before we install the motherboard into the case, we want to make sure that we put on the bracket for the CPU cooler. If you've never used one of these AliExpress coolers before, the mounting can sometimes be finicky, and it's so much easier to just go ahead and throw the mounting hardware on now, and we'll throw the RAM in as well since we're here. Doing this, all we have to do after putting the motherboard in is just slap the cooler down on there and clip it in. We need some sort of filament at the top of the case to mount the motherboard to. At my job, when we receive lawn chairs, we receive these plastic spacers, so I ended up finding one on the ground when I was sweeping, and I cut it into 2 pieces. It comes in this puck shape and it sits in between the lawn chairs. So I then proceeded to drill a hole in each of them in the exact same location of the piece of plastic because we're going to be sitting this on the top area of the case and zip tying the motherboard to it. And this will give us a space between the case and the motherboard so we don't have a grounding issue. After we ran the drill through it a few more times with a bigger bit to make sure we have plenty of space for a zip tie to get through. So giving my idea a quick little demo, I wanted to just see what it would look like if I sat the plastic in. It gives us a near perfect mount next to the standoff. So I think we're going to run with that and stick with the plastic on the top. Screw 1 and screw 2 went in flawlessly and it lined us up perfectly at the top for our zip tied plastic piece. One of the real challenges with the plastic piece was actually getting it in between the board and the case. Every time I would screw in the motherboard, I would lose these clips down the back of the case. So I decided to just take them out and hold on to them with my hands, and then I ended up feeding them through the back. In doing that, I fed the zip tie through the hole on the motherboard at the top and fed it back through the case. That gave us a perfect clip. But these plastic pieces would still hang free. But once I tightened the zip tie, it tightened them to the motherboard, reinforcing the back to the case. So it worked out absolutely perfectly. And for the other side, I just ran a zip tie through the hole in the motherboard and attached it to a clip at the top of the case. Since it was already off the metal, it was on a plastic clip, I decided to just keep it there, and it's a structural piece. And in doing so, we have 4 points of mounting, and the bottom is also sitting on clips. If I give the motherboard a nice good shake in the case, we have no issues at all, and the thing is not moving. I probably sat and pondered on how to install this thing for probably a good 2 days. I didn't want to suffocate the power supply, but I also wanted to have access to all the cables. So I decided on this layout here, where I would take about 5 zip ties and run it through the front of the case, under the bottom, over the power supply, and back around. I ended up doing this on each side and then connecting them kind of together at like a V at the bottom. What this did was it allowed us to get the extension of the AC adapter all the way to the back. It allowed us to get airflow out the top of the case, and also allowed the fan to have access to air inside the case. We also have full access to all the cables on the bottom, and we have space for our hard drive. So this is pretty much the only way this power supply could go in this case. When you're doing this amount of zip tying, you want to just make sure that you have all access to all your zip tie leftovers, and you want to be able to clip them in a fashion that won't leave any hard, sharp spots. Here what we're doing is we're just kind of cleaning up and adding some more structural support. We already have that power cable ran right now. It is actually in and it's not coming out. But luckily, if you check in this area that we have this power supply at, we also have access to the power switch, which is important in an emergency. But definitely when you're doing mods like this, you just want to take your time, look at what you're doing, play with it before you secure it. You don't want to waste these items and waste this product because everything costs money. And I definitely don't want to be wasting stuff. During our specs guide in the beginning of the video, we also talked about having an NVMe heatsink. These are so cheap on AliExpress. You can get them from like $2 to $5. It's totally worth it in a case like this where we're not going to have that much airflow. So we're just going to quickly slap on this heatsink and slap it in the case and get moving on to the more complex cable management and installing the graphics card. Just a few more small things we got to do. We're just going to lay down some thermal paste and slap on the cooler. Very easy. 2 clips, in, out, all done there. On the bottom of the case, there's some mounts for fans, and if you match up a hard drive with these mounts, it's very close. So we could fit a few screws in there, and it gives us a perfect space to mount the hard drive in the bottom. I do want to point out at the time of making this build, I did think I was going to use the 1063 gigabyte as my GPU. This is just a stopgap. If you remember in the beginning of the video, I explained the 3060 Ti situation, and we did end up using a 3060 Ti. Since this case is very hamstrung for air, I wanted to make sure we have at least one intake fan. So I use this 120mm fan I have lying around, and I ended up getting 2 screws in near the bracket of the vertical GPU mount. That just left us with 2 odd mount areas on the left side. So I ended up using some washers and a screw, and it fit just perfectly. Left us just enough room to make sure we can get the extension mounted at the top so we can get power to the wall. Mounting this power extension is pretty much the exact last step of this build because everything is set in place, and now we can finally zip tie it in. This is the last piece before we can really get into benchmarking and getting the computer ready. Essentially what I'm going to do is I'm just going to clean up a few more zip ties, make sure the power cables ran properly, and we are all done with this build.
It's finally time to take a look at the benchmarks, and for our first game at 1440p, we have Microsoft Flight Simulator. We ended up getting an average of 59 FPS with a 1% low of 47 and a 0.1% low of 35. Now, those of you that have actually played Microsoft Flight Simulator, you know how difficult this game is to run, and it's very interesting to see our laptop CPU flex its muscles here. Even my older Xeons with more cores and more threads struggle to run this game at times. I'm getting more FPS on this machine by about double than the old Xeons. During our benchmark runs, you will see on the top left corner we have our CPU layout from core 1 to 16. We have all our statistics up there, so if you guys are tech savvy and familiar, you can just follow along up there as well. Apparently, Microsoft Flight Simulator is very thread heavy on the first couple threads of your CPU. So if you look up top, we can see that the CPU on some threads are boosting up to 4.6 gigahertz, but it's hovering around 4.4 to 4.5. This indicates the load on the other cores is low enough so that these can boost high enough. This CPU runs off a set TDP, and depending on what kind of load the CPU goes through will determine what frequency it runs at. So the more stress on the CPU, the lower the frequency. Other than the 45 watt TDP limit on the CPU, the only modification to the entire BIOS is the XMP profile on the RAM, which is running at 3,460 megahertz. Our 3060 Ti also had a little bit of an overclock on it with 125 megahertz on the core and 495 megahertz on the RAM. Now that we have all that disclosure out of the way, we can continue on with the gaming. For our next game, we have another single thread heavy game, American Truck Simulator at 1440p Ultra. We scored an average of 234 FPS with a 1% low of 134 and a 0.1% low of 65. This is another one of those games where we can really see the laptop CPU flex its muscles with its single thread performance and absolutely smokes some of the other competition for the money. We're starting to see a trend with the single thread games. They're proving to be very strong on this setup. Now we're moving on to get even more demanding. We're going to move on to No Man's Sky at 1440p. I decided to run this game at high settings with 100% resolution scale. We ended up scoring an average of 129 FPS with a 1% low of 60 and a 0.1% low of 10. If you check our top left corner, you can see all the cores running at 4.1 gigahertz. That indicates a very strong workload across all the threads. It's worth noting that the 0.1% low can be affected by the hard drive this is on, and this game was actually on a hard drive. For our next common competitive FPS game, we have Overwatch at 1440p Ultra. We ended up scoring an average of 172 FPS with a 1% low of 120 and a 0.1% low of 96. Yet another great showing for this budget combo. The frame rates are very impressive for the CPU only pulling 30 watts. As the trend continues, I'm sure we'll see more impressive results. For my favorite game on the list, we have Fortnite at 1440p Performance Mode. We have the textures and the draw distance on maxima with an average of 269 with a 1% low of 83 and a 0.1% low of 29. The game felt much more responsive than on my normal Xeon rig that I play with. On that rig, I get anywhere from 160 to 180 with identical settings and the identical graphics card. I will say though that it's very impressive to see a combo like this from AliExpress that's not used or not new performing so well in game. It really does make a great case for new PC parts, especially on AliExpress for price performance. Next up, we've got Call of Duty Modern Warfare at 1440p with a mixture of very high and ultra settings. We scored an average of 114 with a 1% low of 65 and a 0.1% low of 30. I don't really play Call of Duty much anymore, but I do know this game is incredibly unoptimized and doesn't play very well on a lot of systems. However, when I played on this system, I didn't have any issues at all. I didn't notice any hiccups, any frame drops, or any stuttering, which is definitely prevalent on a lot of systems in Warzone 2. For another esport favorite, we have CSGO at 1080p very high settings. We scored an average of 404 FPS with a 1% low of 112 and a 0.1% low of 92. This is by far and away one of the best performances we'll see out of this CPU, and that is a low power, easy to run, single threaded game like Counter-Strike. That amount of FPS in Counter-Strike is close to having a top-end CPU right now as we speak in 2023, so that is a very impressive result. This probably will be the last time we see Counter-Strike Global Offensive as a game in a benchmark, so let me know down in the comments what you guys think about that and if you guys are ready for the new Counter-Strike. Now we have one of my all-time favorites, GTA 5 at 1440p with very high settings. We scored an average of 142 FPS with a 1% low of 97 and a 0.1% low of 77. Now those of you that have watched the channel know how many times I've drove this same block and tested graphics cards. And this was just like every other result, pretty good. GTA 5 is getting old in the tooth, but it's still a little demanding to run on some CPUs, and with this combo, it handled it no problem without a sweat. I still find it pretty incredible how good this game looks still, even all these years later. Let me know in the comments how many of you guys have had phases and came back to this game. I can think of maybe 5 or 6 times in my life I've came back to this game and played it for maybe a month or two and then put it back down. For our next game, we have a modern blend of Control at 1440p. We scored an average of 121 FPS with a 1% low of 92 and a 0.1% low of 12. This is a great modern game for us to take a look at upcoming performance of games that are coming out today. And clearly this CPU is holding up just fine with this GPU and is not holding it back and hasn't been holding it back the entire benchmark run. Now the 1% low did shock me a little bit in this benchmark, and I didn't notice any stuttering. I believe that was from a cinematic part of the intro. As we watched the gameplay, I didn't notice any hiccups or chops, and the frame graph is very smooth. For our last game of the day, Battlefield 2042 at 1440p high settings, we scored an average of 95 FPS with a 1% low of 67 and a 0.1% low of 29. This Battlefield is very well optimized, and we can see that across a distribution of cores and threads that are being utilized. When we tested my Xeons, this game also performed very well on there, but it's also nice to see a CPU with not 14 cores and 28 threads also performing well in this game. This CPU is probably performing its hardest out of any game that we've played, putting up 45 watts sometimes in the wattage meter, which is crazy to say because 45 watts is really nothing. But at 45 watts, the CPU stayed under 70 degrees through all these games. And as soon as it did touch 70 degrees, it went right back down under it. But it's nice to see the CPU performing very well, even in a big FPS like that. For our last and only synthetic benchmark, we're going to be doing Cinebench, and I'm going to be using R15 because it's consistency and my past usage of it on the channel. We ended up scoring 2,118 points in a very impressive performance by the Engineering Sample laptop CPU. Now, I also did benchmarks in 3D Mark, CPU-Z, and Passmark. If you guys are interested in those, I'll be linking those down in the description below, and you guys can check that out for future references. I definitely think for a sub $700 used and new PC, we hit the lottery on performance. I don't think you can do much better than that. The only way you're going to do any better than this is if you get better used part deals. And even at that, I don't know if you're putting in as good of a good looking build as this one.
I know it's been a huge, long video, but I hope you guys enjoyed all the personal sacrifice, all the personal work that I've done throughout this video just to bring it to you guys. This is about 2 months worth of work. I haven't worked on it the entire time. I'm not going to take credit for all that. But this is going to be the last computer I ever built here in California, and I wanted that to be special. And I still have plenty of video ideas. I have videos, 3 videos out I want to do in my head right now. That's how on it I am with cooking the videos up for you. I just wanted to have a PC that I could take with me on the airplane when I go to check out the new house I'm going to pick out. I wanted to have a new PC so that I can have something to compare for people that want to use a GPU and have a Ryzen 5 5600, and I have something close to comparison with that performance. So this is a very important PC to the channel since I no longer have my benchmark computer from back then. And I hope it shows through the video not only my passion for PC, but the passion for trying to make my life better and trying to give you guys videos as I go along in that process. So I want to thank you guys so much for watching this entire video. It's been a long one. And definitely if you guys have any comments, suggestions, concerns about the build or another build I've done in the past, let me know. I still have most of those parts. They are packed away, but as we start moving along, I will have more content for you guys, and I'll have more space because right now I live in a really small house. So thank you guys so much for watching this content. I will catch you guys in the next tech video very soon, and stay tuned for a new GPU video very soon. Hope you guys enjoyed. I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye-bye. Woo! Dropping fucking bombs, boy. Dropping bombs on the PC marketplace. Let me know this. Has there ever been someone who's made PC videos and edits like it's Call of Duty? Please let me know. God, I need a drink.